Hello there, and welcome to this Camtasia presentation on the 4-7 debate, one of the preeminent intellectual occurrences in Korean history. This presentation will give us some exposure to classical Chinese philosophy as background to the Neo-Confucianism that profoundly changes the Korean intellectual landscape. In this presentation, we will do the following. We will say a little bit generally about what philosophy is supposed to be and how the categories of philosophy are thought to apply to classical Chinese philosophy. We will specify some features of Confucianism, and then we will turn to the 4-7 debate. First, we will examine the four sprouts from the classical Chinese philosopher Mengjia. We will look at four virtues that spring up from the four sprouts, and we will relate Mengjia's approach to moral philosophy to a similar moral philosophy found in the West. From there, we will turn to the seven, in this case, the seven emotions, as found in the Chinese classic, the Yegi. To get to the debate itself, we will have to say something about the metaphysical turn made by Neo-Confucianism. This means introducing the metaphysical concepts of Ri and Gi. Finally, we will talk about how three great Korean Neo-Confucian philosophers, Twege, Gobong, and Yulgok, try to make sense of the relation between the four and the seven, and the relation between these sprouts and emotions on the one hand, and Ri and Gi on the other. The 4-7 debate is an issue in philosophy, and to make sense of it, we have to know a little bit about philosophy. Philosophy can be thought of as a search for truth. It is usually divided into four parts. Metaphysics is a search for truth about what is real. Epistemology seeks the truth about what knowledge is supposed to be. Value theory investigates the truth about morality, politics, and beauty. And finally, logic is the rules of correct reasoning, and it is the tool for the discovery of philosophical truth that is used by philosophers in a similar way to the way in which scientists use mathematics. The 4-7 debate has its roots in classical Chinese philosophy. Classical Chinese philosophy is sometimes disparaged by Westerners as not being philosophy at all, but in fact, it does just what Western philosophy does. It searches after truth in all four traditional areas of philosophy. It does, however, give most priority to value theory. We will see, though, that with Neo-Confucianism, there is a marked shift from value theory to metaphysics. And this is an important development for the 4-7 debate and for Korean philosophy in general. As we have said that classical Chinese philosophy has value theory as its main endeavor, let's say a little bit more about it. Value theory divides into three branches: aesthetics, ethics or moral philosophy, and political philosophy. Aesthetics investigates the truth about beauty. Moral philosophy investigates the truth about right and wrong and good and bad. Political philosophy investigates the truth about how to attend to the arrangements of society. Although there are competing schools of classical Chinese philosophy, our concern here is with Confucianism. Confucianism competes with these other Chinese schools of philosophy: Taoism, Moism, and legalism, but it arises before Buddhism comes to China. Confucianism emphasizes all three areas of value theory: aesthetics, moral philosophy, and political philosophy. In particular, it emphasizes developing a flourishing life through self-cultivation. The flourishing life is one in which the political system encourages the development of personal virtue and appropriate appreciation and an appropriate appreciation of moral aesthetics. The Confucians believed strongly that there was a formative relation between the idea of ritual, the character here, Ria, and Dok, or virtue. Ria, it is thought, forms the Dok person. And that brings us to the four in the 4-7 debate. The four is essentially an idea about how it is possible for virtue to develop in people through four inborn moral impulses. These four impulses are developed into full-blown virtue through participation in the rituals of the community. In order to develop virtue, in order to become a moral being at all, one must be born with these four sprouts in one's heart. The notion of four sprouts comes to us from the classical Chinese philosopher Mengzi, whose name is Latinized in the West for Westerners as Mencius, and who is known in Korea as Mengjia. A word is in order here about the etymology of the character don, which I have translated as sprouts, but which is usually translated as beginning. The understanding of this character has been that the component on the left, the solipja, which means to stand, was the semantic element of this character, and the element to the right, the gut danja, was merely a phonetic element. This dan component to the right appears to be constituted of a mesanja, meaning mountain, on the top, and a mario ija, meaning and, on the bottom. In fact, however, the entire right component is a primitive pictograph of a sprout, with leaflets above the ground and roots below. The sanja and the ija are stylizations of that pictograph. In the earliest forms of the graph, the ripja that appears to the left was part of this pictograph. Originally, then, it appears that the gut danja with the solipja attached to the left was simply an alternative character to the one without the solipja. Both meant sprout. The meaning we normally apply to the gut danja, an end or an extreme, or in what seems inexplicable, a beginning, all are apparently derived from this pictograph. The sprout is a beginning, and the leaflets are the extreme ends. Mengjia understood this character as a sprout, and that translation is in keeping with his general usage of agricultural terms. Don, in most contemporary translations of Mengjia, is rendered as sprout. And this is in keeping with, again, Mengjia's usage of agricultural metaphors. Mengjia introduces the four sprouts in a passage about a child about to fall into a well. Mengzi said, "Humans all have hearts that are not unfeeling toward others. The former kings had hearts that were not unfeeling towards others. So they had governments that were not unfeeling toward others. If one puts into practice government that is not unfeeling toward others by means of a heart that is not unfeeling toward others, bringing order to the whole world is in the palm of your hand." The reason why I say that humans all have hearts that are not unfeeling toward others is this. Suppose someone suddenly saw a child about to fall into a well. Everyone in such a situation would have a feeling of alarm and compassion, not because one sought to get in good with the child's parents, not because one wanted fame among their neighbors and friends, and not because one would dislike the sound of the child's cries. From this, we can see that if one is without the heart of compassion, one is not a human. If one is without the heart of disdain, one is not a human. If one is without the heart of deference, one is not a human. If one is without the heart of approval and disapproval, one is not a human. The heart of compassion is the sprout of benevolence. The heart of disdain is the sprout of righteousness. The heart of deference is the sprout of propriety. The heart of approval and disapproval is the sprout of wisdom. People having these four sprouts is like they're having four limbs. To have these four sprouts, but to say that one is unable to be virtuous, is to steal from oneself. To say that one's ruler is unable to be virtuous is to steal from one's ruler. In general, having these four sprouts within oneself, if one knows how to fill them all out, it will be like a fire starting up, a spring breaking through. If one can merely fill them out, they will be sufficient to care for all within the four seas. If one merely fails to fill them out, they will be insufficient to serve one's parents. The idea of the four sprouts gives Mengjia a very interesting and sophisticated understanding of moral psychology. The idea is that there are original attributes of human nature that allow us to make moral judgments and to be motivated to moral purposes. The four sprouts are the basis of Mengjia's famous claim that human nature is good. If cultivated, and Confucians have thought that the cultivation occurs through Ria, these incipient moral impulses develop into full-blown virtue. Virtue is a deep-seated disposition toward goodness. If the sprouts are left untended to, however, just like sprouts from seeds, they will wither and die. In the notion that humans have original dispositions suited for moral beings, Mengjia is thought to be an associate member of a school of moral sentiments, which includes and is founded by Lord Shaftesbury, but also includes Francis Hutcheson, David Hume, Adam Smith, and a growing number of contemporary moral philosophers. Mengjia's moral theory is a tremendous and far-sighted accomplishment. It offers a compelling alternative to principle-based modern ethical theories like Kantianism and utilitarianism. So here are the 4 sprouts and their associated virtue. Recall in viewing this screen that this video presentation has an associated handout and Chinese character vocabulary list that gives the character meaning and the combined character word meanings. So here we go with the sprouts and virtues. First, tukun, compassion, is the root of in, or benevolence. Suok, disdain, is the root of li, or justice. Justice or righteousness, sorry. Sayang, deference, is the root of ria, which means here propriety. Shibi, approval and disapproval, is the root of ji, wisdom. Now let's move forward from Mengjia and the 4 to the background of the 7. To get at the 7, a word is in order about classical Confucian texts. Confucianism has a set of canonized texts that are split into 2 groups. The first group is older in the canon, and it is made up of what we call the 5 classics. This group includes the Book of History, the Book of Odes, the Book of Ritual, the Book of Changes, and the Spring and Autumn Annals. To these, the Chinese Neo-Confucian philosopher Zhu Xi appended what are called the 4 books. This group includes the collected sayings of Confucius, the Analects, the Book of Mencius, the Mengjia, and then 2 chapters of one of the 5 classics, the Book of Ritual, that are repackaged as small freestanding books. These 2 chapters from the original Book of Ritual are the Doctrine of the Mean and the Great Learning. Several passages from these canonical texts make reference to the 7 emotions. One of the 5 classics, the Book of Ritual, the Yegi, or as it's known in Chinese, the Li, sets out the 7 emotions. Let's read section 18 of the Li Yun chapter of the Yegi. Therefore, when it is said that the ruler being a sage can look on all under the sky as one family, and on all in the middle states as one man, this does not mean that he will do so on premeditation and purpose. He must know men's feelings, lay open to them what they consider right, show clearly to them what is advantageous, and comprehend what are their calamities. Being so furnished, he is then able to effect the thing. What are the feelings of men? They are joy, anger, sadness, fear, love, disliking, and liking. These 7 feelings belong to men without their learning them. So here are the 7 emotions. And remember again that they are listed on the Chinese vocabulary sheet that accompanies this video. The 7 emotions are he, joy. No, anger. Sadness. Ku, fear. love. O, hate. And yo, desire. The Yankee goes further in its treatment of emotions. The first chapter of the Doctrine of the Mean puts appropriate measures on the emotions. What heaven has conferred is called the nature. In accordance with this, the state in which happiness, anger, grief, and joy have not been expressed is called equilibrium. The state in which they have already been expressed and each attains its proper measure is called harmony. Equilibrium is the great root of heaven and earth. Harmony is the all-pervading way of heaven and earth. When equilibrium and harmony are fully achieved, heaven and earth will rest in good order, and the myriad of creatures will flourish. On this account, emotional life is a vital part of morality. It is the emotions that motivate our moral conduct. These emotions, of course, then, ought not to be suppressed, since they are the very things that motivate us to take moral action. But they are also not to be allowed to run to excess. At this point, we can begin to think about how Neo-Confucianism comes into play in setting up the 4-7 debate. While Neo-Confucianism in its classical version was mainly concerned with value theory, while Confucianism in its classical version was mainly concerned with value theory, Neo-Confucianism makes a very clear movement in the direction of metaphysics. Recall that metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that seeks after the truth concerning the nature of reality. Now, the moral concerns of classical Confucianism are not abandoned. Rather, these moral concerns will come to be seen through the lens of metaphysics. This metaphysical turn in Confucianism was driven by metaphysical enterprises of Taoism and Buddhism. Very often, the Neo-Confucians themselves cannot see how profoundly their own views have been subliminally influenced by the metaphysical doctrines of Taoism and Buddhism. Under the influence of these other doctrines, the Neo-Confucians began to think about the nature and makeup of reality. They came to understand the world as being constituted of a network of interlocking patterns or principles. That is how we translate the character appearing here, Ri, which means principle or pattern. Following closely on a Buddhist idea, the Neo-Confucians perceived that every single or particular thing contained within itself somehow every pattern of the universe. We can say that the metaphysical view here is of the underlying reality of all things in the universe is one of the metaphysical patterns that govern the whole structure, but that they are also found in every individual. The macro system is perfectly reflected in the microsystem. While it is true that every particular thing contains within it all the patterns, not all of these patterns are manifest in each thing. There is some entity in things that prevents them from manifesting everything that is in them. This metaphysical feature of individuals that prevents them from manifesting all the truth within is Gi. And Gi is one of the most difficult concepts of Eastern philosophy to get a handle on. Keep in mind that there is a description of what this concept is trying to get at on the handout that accompanies this video. Remember that Gi in Chinese is Qi, romanized with a Q to begin with. The first letter of Qi is a Q. The Neo-Confucians, working with the concept of Ri and Qi, begin to alter Mengjia's conception of the four sprouts. Mengjia had a developmental vision in which the sprouts exist in us as seedlings to be developed into something more complete that is not present in us to begin with. The Neo-Confucians cannot share that understanding with Mengjia because they have accepted a Buddhist-inspired metaphysic in which we are complete beings from the very start. All the patterns of the universe are within us. Rather than a developmental model, the Neo-Confucians embrace a restorative model of morality. We are complete within, but we need to restore the manifestation of that completeness. By removing the murkiness brought on to us by Qi, one's original nature, one's Poncha Jisung can shine forth. The 4-7 debate is a dialogue by the leading Korean scholars of Confucianism about the relation between classical Confucian moral views and Neo-Confucian metaphysical views. It is a debate about how the four sprouts are related to the 7 emotions, and about how the 4 and the 7 are related to Ri and Qi. Should we think of the 4 as the same kind of mental phenomenon as the 7, or are they different? Now that we have outlined the background to the 4-7 debate, we can specify briefly the positions of the leading players in the debate. Twege insisted that the 4 are different in kind than the 7. Our moral impulses are not the same kinds of feelings we experience when we have emotions. Metaphysically, the 4 sprouts are purely reflective of Ri. The 7 emotions, on the other hand, are an admixture of Ri and Qi. The operating idea is that the 4 must be used to regulate the 7. Twege's opponent in the debate, Gobong, countered that the 4 ought to be better understood as an underlying vein beneath the 7. Twege is not having any of this. He lightly modifies his position to one in which the 4 are not perfect reflections of the Ri, but instead naturally inclined to the good. Meanwhile, the 7 incline us to error. Later on, Yul Gok, who sought out and spent several days in conversation with Twege, entered into the debate. Yul Gok stakes out his position that the 4 are the good aspects of the 7. He disagrees then with Twege that the 4 and the 7 are fundamentally different in kind. The 7, in fact, says Yul Gok, comprehend the 4. There is much more that might be said about this complex debate. This is all, though, that we are going to do. We have now, in this presentation, examined the background from Confucianism and Neo-Confucianism that precipitates the debate. We have examined Meng Jia's presentation of the four sprouts. We have examined the presentation of the seven emotions from the Yegi. We have seen the Neo-Confucian metaphysical conceptualizations of Ri and Gi. And finally, we have seen how the Korean Neo-Confucians bring together the four and the seven with Ri and Gi to stake out their positions in the debate. The end.